It's the life for me. Guess you just got back today. Why that bullshit up getting away? Haven't changed that much to say. Still think those cats are great. They were asking if you were around, where you was, where you could be found. Told them you were living downtown, driving on the old man crazy. Come on, boys are back in town, boys are back in town. Boys are back in town. The boys are back in town. Boys are back in town. Boys are back in town. Boys are back in town.
Well, we're playing, it's Phil Lynott's birthday today, and they erected a big statue of him yesterday just off Grafton Street in Dublin, so it's all kind of connected with that. Coming up in January, it's 20 years since he died, so it's all kind of connected with that. And we're really just celebrating his music tonight. We're playing a short set of his songs, and songs that I recorded with him both in and out of Thin Lizzy.
This whole concert really is in tribute to Phil. We haven't really done that in the past probably yet. I mean, the statue's going up, which is really a great thing.
It's kind of saying thank you to the guy as well, because everybody on that stage pretty much tonight owes something to Phil. It's a very special night for us.
Kind of nice to get all the guys together again, you know, Eric and Scott, Brian, Gary. We've been having a bit of a laugh.
It takes me right back to the very first night that Thin Lizzy started, and sort of onwards from that.
Brian Danny told me about the statue being unveiled on the 19th of August about 2 months ago, and I said, is there a gig? And he said, well, there is no gig as far as I know. I said, well, maybe we should do something.
Do something rather than just unveil the statue and then nothing.
And I wanted to get the kind of four main guitarists, which were Eric Bell, who was the original guitarist who played on Whiskey in the Jar, obviously Brian Robertson and Scott Gorham, who played on the big hits like Boys Are Back in Town and Jailbreak and stuff like that. And really, so over the course of the last couple of months, it's kind of come together just through talking to those guys and getting together and rehearsing and all that.
It's always been a bit emotional doing these things, but this one I find is the most emotional yet because of the statue.
It's a big one. It's a big one, and it's emotional.
It's just incredible, you know. I can't believe there's still so much interest in the band, you know.
It's a pretty incredible thing that they've, you know, let this, you know, statue go up, you know, because there's not too many cities where you would, you know, get a statue of a rock and roll sort of icon guy, even though he is an icon, you know, put right in the middle of their city. You know, usually it's some politician or Churchill or whatever, but, you know, there's Phil right in the middle of Grafton Street. So it's pretty incredible. But, you know, in saying that, he was, you know, a pretty incredible guy.
I first met Philip, I joined a band called Skid Row in 1969. I moved down from Belfast to Dublin, and Phil was the lead singer in that band. He didn't play bass at that time, he was just a stand-up front singer.
I got to know him in school. I went up to him one day and said, you know, I really like your band, you know, the Black Eagles, you know. And he kind of remembered me, you know. He said to me, he says, after a while, he says, you know, you play drums? And I said, yeah, you know. And so he said, our drummer's leaving shortly, you know. Would you like to come down and do an audition? I said, yeah.
And the night I joined the band, he said, well, if you meet up tomorrow morning, I'll take you around Dublin and we'll kind of see the sights together. And he said if we met about 9 o'clock in the morning, which knowing him later on seems very strange because he never used to get up that early in the later years.
So when he left Skid Row and I left the Sugar Shack, we decided to get together again.
I remember when me and Phil met first in Dublin and we formed Thin Lizzy. I basically just asked them, did they know any bass players and drummers that they could let me know of, and they said, well, we don't know anybody offhand, but if you go to a certain pub at the weekend, there's loads of group members there, and we'll be there as well, introduce you to people. You know.
But in those days he was a very driven young guy, he was very kind of ambitious and full of energy, you know, full of it. He'd be up early in the morning down the markets buying himself clothes and just very on the case kind of a guy.
I was just about to walk out when Philip called me back. And he said, then he turned around to Bran, a drummer, and said, we've went as far as we can go with this group, let's form a new one. So Bran sort of said, well, okay, I'll go along with whatever you want to do.
Skid Row moved to England from there, and he formed Thin Lizzy with Eric Bell and Brian Downey. And they followed us to England. We were doing very well in England at the time, and they came out and they had a really, really rough time until they had Whiskey in the Jar, actually, until they had the hit. They had a really rough time. And then Eric suddenly left in the middle of an Irish tour, and I took his place for about 4 months, and then I went back to whatever it was I wanted to do after that, and then they kind of, that was mid-70s, sort of 74. And then after that came the two guitar lineup, which became known as the classic lineup with Brian Robertson and Scott Gorham. They went on to record all the big numbers like Jailbreak and Boys Are Back in Town and all that stuff.
When I first joined the band, I didn't really know too much about Ireland. You know, I didn't get the Irish thing. But in coming over here and, you know, sort of joining forces with Phil, he was the guy that educated me about what Ireland was all about, and you know, the historic side, and you know, the musical side. And he took a lot of time out to explain all these really sort of Irishy kind of things that I never knew about before.
My old best friend, Big Charlie, who was a roadie with the band, and we went to school together. And he phoned me up and said, "Oh, you need a guitar player. You got to get your arse down here and da-da-da," which I did. I auditioned as a drummer first, and then as a guitar player for Lizzy. I guess when you're 17, it's like, I didn't even think twice about walking out of the house and coming down here. I would think about it twice now, obviously, but in those days, and at that age, you have that adventure, and it was a big adventure for me.
I think Philip said, listen, man, whenever we start gigging, we should call ourselves something. You know, we haven't got a name yet. Because I'm from Belfast, we talk differently than people from Dublin. And so they don't pronounce their H's here, which is tree and tick and tin, and I say three, thick and thin. There was a comic called The Dandy, and there was a female robot in it called Tin Lizzy. And I somehow latched onto that name and said, why don't we put an H into Tin Lizzy? And then people in Dublin have to make an effort to say it because they don't pronounce H's.
I mean, I think Phil would approve of kind of all of it, you know, people getting out and playing the songs. First and foremost, Phil was a player. More than anything else, the guy was a player. He was always the first guy on the stage. He was always the first guy down at some club grabbing the guitar out of some guy's hand and getting up and jamming, you know. He was a player.
I mean, he stuck out like a sore thumb around Dublin at that time, as you can imagine, because there weren't very many black guys around Dublin. There was only two that I knew. There was a guy called Dave Murphy, who was a piano teacher, and Phil. That was about it.
He was very gentle, sort of man, and very softly spoken and poetic. And, you know, very romantic type of bloke.
We went for this Chinese meal together, and he said, order this, and he told me to order this sweet and sour pork. I'd never had it before, and I absolutely hated it, and he ate mine. And that kind of established the sort of precedent for our relationship from then on.
He seemed to have a great way of building up your confidence in music.
And he was always keeping his ear to the ground. He, like when punk came along, he was right in there. He knew what was going on, and he made friends with the Sex Pistols, and he'd go around his house, and Sid Vicious would be there, and Steve Jones would be there, and then we'd start playing with these guys. And we had a band called the Greedies at one time, which was half Thin Lizzy and half the Sex Pistols. So he was always a very open-minded kind of guy, not afraid to experiment, which is very healthy for a musician.
We were rehearsing one day in a pub in London, where we used to rehearse there every week, and Phil took off the bass and picked up the other guitar we had, and just started, he went over to the mic and just started strumming various Irish songs. Our manager, one of our managers, Ted Carroll, walked in the door. He was going, what was that song you were playing? And Phil said, Jesus, it was Whiskey in a Jar or something like that, you know. And he said, you know something, that could be a hit.
It's kind of that Spinal Tap thing, you know. We're not heavy metal, we're all rock. But that's exactly what we were.
All the way through Thin Lizzy, yes. Played Gibson Les Pauls. So for 11 years. But as soon as I left Lizzy, I went over to the Fender.
I'm a Les Paul fanatic, simply because you get the body, the depth, and it's like if you use a Strat, which I do in studios sometimes for certain sounds, it's thin. It's a thin sound. The Les Paul is big. We went for the two Les Pauls because we wanted two guitars that pretty much matched up together to try to gel the sound together. So one guitar wasn't so far away, you know, from the other. I'm playing the same Les Paul now tonight as Lizzy gave me when I joined the band at 17.
I joined the band again in 1977 briefly for a big American tour with Queen, because Brian Robertson had cut his hand up in a fight in the speakeasy, and so they called me and I did that, and then they asked me to stay, and I was working with a band called Coliseum 2 at the time, so I went back. We'd done a record and I didn't want to just kind of walk out. So I went back, I said, I'll give it another year. If you still want me, we'll talk then. A year later, Phil calls me again, you know, can you join the band? Yeah, okay, right, I'm in.
I was afraid of breaking the magic circle. You know, there was four of us, we had created this thing, we'd had a lot of hits, and now that magic circle seemed to be broken, and is it going to get too broken now? Until I got used to Gary's style and, you know, his personality and all that, and then it's, you know, took off, you know, and it was okay.
It just came about, really. You'd have sections of a song where, all right, there's rhythm there, but, oh, let's stick something else there. And because in those days, you see, you had record companies you'd be signed up for like a 3-album deal over a period. And you'd have time to develop a band. You don't have that now. You know, you get 1-album deal, and if that's a bummer, you're out. You can see from the Nightlife album to Fighting to Jailbreak, which was the one that broke it, you can see it.
You know, I mean, you get so many people Say, you know, wow, it's really cool. You know, you and Brian, you know, invented the twin guitar thing. Well, we didn't invent it. You know, I mean, the Allman Brothers were there. Les Paul was doing it, for God's sakes. Wishbone Ash, you know, a lot of the Eagles. A lot of people were doing it. We just happened to do it in a different way, in a real sort of rock sense. You know, we beefed up the, you know, or we tried to, and we beefed up the sound and put it up against a different landscape. And it was never really a premeditated thing. It was more of an accident, really. I mean, we were in the studio, and I think it was Brian Robertson. He was doing a line, and somebody had hit the echo, the delay button, right, which delayed it by maybe like a half second. So as he was going down, it was harmonizing with itself on the way down the scale. And it got printed, you know, and well, that was pretty cool. Let's listen to that back, you know, and it fit beautifully. And then we decided, well, I'll figure out what those notes are, and then we'll take the echo bit off, and I'll just lay that harmony line down there. And we never even really thought about it as being a sound. It was just like, oh, this is a pretty cool thing, you know. We kind of dig doing this, you know. It's a little extra added attraction. We got a review in NME or Melody Maker or something, and the reviewer said, and that patented Thin Lizzy twin guitar, harmony guitar sound. And I thought, oh wow, yeah, that's pretty cool. I call up Brian and say, hey Brian, man, we got a fucking sound.
I'm sort of reported as being a kind of arrogant little Scottish git, which I'm quite sure I was at that time. I probably wouldn't have got the gig otherwise.
The band was fabulous, I thought, up to Whiskey in the Jar. And I mean, it was still good with Whiskey in the Jar and so on, but what happened was everyone wanted another hit record. So we were just pressurized. Before the hit, we could play anything. And now it was, oh, you can't play this, and you can't play that, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. And I thought, well, I might as well have stayed in the show band.
But it got very kind of strange for me, and it turned very sour during one American tour where there was a lot of drugs going down, and Phil was not in a fit state to be on stage, frankly speaking, a lot of the time, and it really got to me after a while. And I did a very bad thing. I walked out in the middle of a tour, which was something I should never have done. But the way I was feeling at the time, that's just kind of the way it was, and it was just getting to be a joke, the whole thing, and I just thought, no, I can't do this anymore.
We used to jam a lot on stage and ad-lib, and it was terrific, you know. It's really good. And all that started disappearing. And I just couldn't handle it, you know. I said, this isn't for me anymore. We did an Irish tour. Ironically, I'm from Belfast. We played Belfast that night, and I threw my guitar up in the air and kicked all my amplifiers off the stage and walked off, well, staggered off. And that was my last gig.
So I decided to quit the band in 1982. I had an extremely bad heroin problem at the time, and so did Phil. I mean, we were both going through this problem at the same time. But for me, I think I was probably, for some reason, I felt I was in a little bit more pain. It felt to me, and I know this for a fact, but you know, the sound, our energy, everything was really going downhill. And I really didn't want to see, after all this work we had put together, you know, I mean, we had done a hell of a lot of traveling and, you know, interviews, albums. I mean, we had done a lot of stuff, a lot of work, and to see it start to go into the shitter, you know, that was kind of scaring me, and I didn't want to see that, you know. I didn't want to see the sort of the reputation being dragged down to a point where you couldn't get it back up again. And I expressed all these feelings and views to Phil, you know. I said, you know, that's it. I can't take it anymore, man. I gotta go. And when I told him that, he was a great salesman, Phil. He was forever the salesman. I walked in there, boom, this was it. I'm out of here. Well, I'm gone. See you later. Bye-bye. And he said, wait a minute. you know, we can't leave it like that. You know, the fans, you got to think of the fans. Of what we got to do is, we'll get a new guitar player in. I know who this John Sykes. We'll get him in. We'll write a new album. We'll record a new album. We'll do a worldwide farewell tour, and we'll do it like that. And I went, and I was so fucked up at the time. Well, yeah, okay. And I left this house thinking, shit. I walked in there to quit the band, and now I'm doing a new album and another fucking world tour.
Phil and I argued all the time. But like I said earlier, we actually lived together for a long time as well. But it's what I would call constructive aggression. Because if that hadn't been there, then I don't think you would have got that energy.
And we didn't sort of speak for 4 years, and then we got together. We met at Heathrow Airport in 1982 or whatever it was, 83, when they were doing their farewell tour. And I came to play with them at Hammersmith, and I got up and I played a couple of songs with them, and we kind of made up again then. And then we went on to record the Out in the Field single in 1985. And we spent a lot of time together during that kind of first 6 months of 85.
Because there was a sort of there was a period when I was with them that we were together that was terrific. And then because of what I did in Belfast, I mean, it was silly, but it was just one of those things that it was spontaneous. I was playing and I just went, to hell with this. And I was halfway through the show. So, you know, I really let the side down. It took them a long time to forgive me for that, which I can't blame them for, you know. So myself and Phil was a little bit iffy for a long time. And then he phoned me up. Eric, we're playing in town tonight. Do you want to come down and get up and do Whiskey and the Rocker? And I said, yeah, great, you know.
You know, he was very close to all those guys anyway, and you know, they were like, he spent more time with Thin Lizzy than he did with his own family. And I think actually when the band broke up, that was the beginning of the end for him, in my opinion, because he became a very lonely guy after that.
There was a certain distance that he would say, stop, whenever you tried to approach him, you know, like for instance, you know, like you say to someone, a friend, listen, you're drinking too much, you know, you got to knock it in the head for a while, it's doing you in, or you're taking this too much, you're doing that too much. And he would never really take that. He would say, listen man, stay out of me head.
In those days it wasn't very like trendy to go into rehab like it is now, because he probably would have liked it now. He'd been like down the Priory trying to pull Kate Moss or something. You know, it sounds funny, but the guy would never ask for help. I mean, don't think that we didn't talk to him. I spoke to him more than once about this, and he'd go, yeah, you're right, you know, thanks for being concerned, kind of thing. Next day, it was as if the conversation hadn't occurred at all. He was off again.
You obviously have some inkling. I didn't realise it was as bad as it was until just coming up to Christmas. Phil was in his bed. I said, well, I want to go and give him Jesse's present and my present. Well, he was just lying there. And he couldn't really talk. I sat in the bed with him and he gave me a hug, and I went back down to see Phyllis and I said, no, you better get a doctor now, because it's not right.
He was his own man, and he had a very strong constitution, and I suppose he thought he was indestructible. So he just went his own way. And I remember we got the papers on a Monday, the Sunday papers on a Monday, because we were in another country, and it was like, my wife, the time she picked it up, she went, this look of shock on her face, and I knew what had happened straight away, and yeah, it was an awful time really, terrible time. Couldn't believe it. Even though I knew he was in the state he was in, you just don't really think it's going to happen to someone that you know, and it was a big shock.
He was a real sort of Irish ambassador wherever we went. We'd do radio interviews all over the world, you know, and he would, without any prompting, he would be giving a history lesson to whoever was out there listening in radio land about Ireland.
Good songs don't go away. Good melody stays in your head, and that's what it was about.
And he'd be there tonight, you know, because, well, we're all there, you know. I'm sure he would be there.
who just got